The discovery. Council in panic. The alien council shrieked in horror as they realized the human homeworld of Earth was classified as a Tier 8 nightmare planet. This rating was reserved for only the deadliest planets filled with savage beasts, rabid monsters, and brutal environments. The council chamber erupted into panic chatter as the various alien representatives argued about how they had underestimated the human race for so long. Jacob Mitchell. In the center of the chamber stood Jacob Mitchell, a rugged human soldier. His face was scarred from countless battles, and his eyes gleamed with a fierce intensity. The council had summoned him here today out of desperation. Mission briefing. Soldier Mitchell, thank you for coming on such short notice. Umbra, the Binar counselor, said. His long tentacles twitched nervously. I'm afraid we have a situation that requires your unique abilities. Jacob crossed his arms. I'm listening. The Zorgan threat. Are you aware of the Zorgans? Umbra asked. Jacob nodded. The Zorgans were a ruthless, xenophobic race that had been threatening galactic peace for years. I'm afraid our diplomatic mission to their empire has failed, Umbra continued. Worse, they've stolen a powerful artificial intelligence called the Nexus. If they unlock its secrets, they could conquer the entire galaxy. Desperate plea. The council members murmured in agreement, their voices laced with fear. We need you to infiltrate Zorgan space and retrieve the Nexus before it's too late, Umbra said. You're the only one who can do it. Jacob raised an eyebrow. Why me? Because you're human, Umbra said. Your species has a unique combination of skills, adaptability, and tenacity that no other race possesses. You're our only hope. Acceptance. Jacob considered for a moment. He knew the risks were high. The Zorgans were a formidable enemy, and their technology was far advanced. But he also knew what was at stake. If the Zorgans unlocked the Nexus, it would mean the end of freedom in the galaxy. Entire species would be enslaved or exterminated. He couldn't let that happen. I'll do it, Jacob said, his voice filled with grim determination. As he turned to leave, Umbra caught his arm. Be careful, the Binar warned. The Zorgans have never been beaten. Even our most advanced infiltration tech may not be enough. Human resolve. Jacob grinned, a fierce light in his eyes. I don't need your tech, he said. I'm human. We're born survivors. With that, he strode out of the council chamber, ready to take on the most dangerous mission of his life. The fate of the galaxy rested on his shoulders, and he would not fail. He couldn't afford to, for if he did, it would mean the end of everything he held dear. The infiltration. Preparation. Jacob took a deep breath as he prepared for the mission ahead. His plasma rifle hung at his side, a comforting weight. He double-checked his pack, ensuring he had all the necessary supplies. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. He couldn't risk taking anything that might slow him down or draw unwanted attention. Entering Zorgan space. The journey to the Zorgan border was uneventful. Jacob kept a low profile, blending in with the various traders and merchants that frequented these outer rim routes. But as he approached the heavily guarded Zorgan space, he knew his real challenge was about to begin. Checkpoint encounter. At the first checkpoint, Jacob assumed the persona of a Zorgan merchant. He had spent years fighting on the fringes of their empire, learning their language and customs. He spoke the guttural Zorgan tongue fluently, his accent indistinguishable from a native. The guards waved him through with barely a glance. The second and third checkpoints were similarly easy to pass, but at the fourth and final one, Jacob sensed something was off. The guards were more alert, their eyes narrowed with suspicion. One of them, a burly Zorgan with a scar across his snout, approached Jacob's vehicle. DNA scan. Out, the guard grunted. DNA scan. Jacob's heart raced. DNA scans were rare, usually reserved for only the most suspicious individuals. If they scanned him, they'd know immediately that he was human. He had no choice. Escape and pursuit. As the guard reached for his scanner, Jacob lunged forward, slamming his fist into the Zorgon's jaw. The guard stumbled back, but quickly recovered, lashing out with a vicious right hook. Jacob ducked, the blow grazing his cheek, and retaliated with a swift kick to the guard's knee. The Zorgon howled in pain, collapsing to the ground. The other guards were already rushing towards them, weapons drawn. Jacob knew he had to act fast. He grabbed the fallen guard's blaster and fired off a few shots, forcing the others to take cover. Then he sprinted for the nearest shuttle. Desperate maneuver. Alarms blared as Jacob hijacked the shuttle. He punched in the coordinates for the secret research facility, praying that the information he'd gathered was accurate. As he took off, Zorgon fighters were already in pursuit. Jacob pushed the shuttle to its limits, weaving and dodging through the barrage of plasma fire. But as he neared the facility, he realized he had no chance of landing undetected. The Zorgons were closing in fast. In a moment of desperate inspiration, Jacob angled the shuttle towards the dying star that the facility orbited. It was a risky move, but it was his only chance. Slingshot maneuver. He accelerated to full throttle, using the star's immense gravitational pull to slingshot around it at incredible speeds. The Zorgons, caught off guard by the sudden maneuver, couldn't match his velocity. They were forced to pull back, lest they be pulled into the star's fatal embrace. Jacob's shuttle, however, was not designed for such extreme conditions. As he completed the slingshot, alarms blared, warning of imminent system failure. He barely managed to crash land onto the facility's docking bay, the impact knocking him unconscious. Regaining consciousness. When Jacob came to, his body ached with numerous injuries. His weapons had been destroyed in the crash. All he had left was a Zorgon plasma knife he'd managed to steal from the guard. But he was alive, and he was on the facility. Now, the real work began. The Nexus. Entering the facility, Jacob limped through the airlock into the research facility, his hand pressed against the wound in his side. He had to find the Nexus before he bled out. The station was eerily quiet, the only sound the hum of machinery and the hiss of recycled air. He pulled out the plasma knife, its blue glow illuminating the dark corridor. Hacking the terminal. The first terminal he found was easy to hack, his fingers flying over the keys. Within minutes, he had a map of the facility. The Nexus was deep in the heart of the station, guarded by Zorgon elites. There was no way he could fight through them in his current state. Environmental controls. Jacob's eyes fell on the environmental controls, and a desperate plan formed in his mind. He could vent the atmosphere from the station, section by section, leaving only the path to the Nexus pressurized. It was a huge risk, but it was his only chance. Implementing the plan. He set to work, fingers dancing across the interface. Alarms blared as the air started to vent, red lights flashing. He could hear the Zorgon shouting, their heavy footsteps echoing through the halls as they rushed to seal the breaches. Using the chaos as cover, Jacob slipped through the corridors, his breath rasping in his throat. The pain in his side was getting worse, his vision blurring at the edges. But he pushed on, the map guiding him closer to his target. Confrontation. Finally, he reached the chamber housing the Nexus. As he stepped inside, a hulking Zorgon warrior blocked his path. The alien was clad in heavy armor, a massive plasma axe gripped in his claws. Jacob ducked as the axe swung at his head, the heat of the blade singing his hair. He lashed out with his knife, but the Zorgon armor deflected the blow. They traded strikes, Jacob's agility the only thing keeping him alive against the Zorgon's brute strength. In a desperate gambit, Jacob lunged forward, his knife aimed at the tubes connecting the Zorgon's armor to his life support system. The blade found its mark, severing the hoses. The Zorgon gasped, clawing at his throat as the air hissed out of his suit. Retrieving the Nexus, Jacob didn't wait to watch him die. He staggered past, his eyes fixed on the Nexus. It hovered in the center of the room, a pulsing orb of energy suspended in a containment field. He reached out, his fingers brushing against the field. So close, just a little further. Impressive, human, A voice boomed from the shadows. But you're too late. Jacob spun, his heart pounding. A Zorgan scientist stood on a raised platform. A plasma cannon aimed directly at Jacob's chest. The alien's face was twisted in a cruel smile, his finger tightening on the trigger. The final battle. Standoff. Jacob stared down the barrel of the plasma cannon, his heart pounding. Dr. Zavok sneered, his finger tightening on the trigger. You're too late, human, Zavok gloated. I've already begun unlocking the Nexus's secrets. Soon, the Zorgans will be unstoppable. Jacob's eyes narrowed. He had to keep Zavok talking, buy himself some time. You think the Nexus will give you power? He asked. It's just a tool. It won't make the Zorgans invincible. Zavok laughed, a harsh, grating sound. You underestimate us, human. The Zorgan intellect is superior in every way. We will bend the Nexus to our will, just as we will bend the galaxy. Weakness in the field. As Zavok spoke, Jacob noticed something, a flicker in the containment field surrounding the Nexus. It was slight, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a weakness. Jacob tensed, ready to spring into action. You're wrong, he said, his voice low and steady. The Nexus isn't a tool. It's alive, and it will never serve the Zorgan. Zavok's eyes widened in surprise, and Jacob seized his chance. He lunged forward, his hand outstretched, reaching for the Nexus. At the same moment, Zavok fired, a blast of searing plasma streaking toward Jacob's chest. Nexus energy. But as Jacob's fingers closed around the Nexus, something incredible happened. The containment field shattered, and the Nexus's energy surged into Jacob's body. It enveloped him, a shimmering cocoon of pure power, absorbing the plasma blast harmlessly. Zavok screamed as the feedback from the containment field's destruction engulfed him. Tendrils of energy lashed out, wrapping around the Zorgan scientist, burning through his flesh. In moments, there was nothing left but a smoking husk. Empowered, Jacob stood amidst the chaos, unharmed, the Nexus pulsing in his hand. He could feel its power coursing through him, suffusing every cell of his being. And with that power came knowledge, a sudden, instinctive understanding of the very fabric of the universe. He looked at the wall, a solid mass of reinforced steel. But to his new senses, it was nothing more than a lattice of atoms held together by electromagnetic forces, forces he could now control. Jacob reached out with his mind, reshaping those forces, rearranging the atoms. The wall shimmered and vanished, creating a path to the outside. Extraction. He stepped through, the Nexus guiding his every move. Once outside the facility, Jacob activated his communicator. Umbra, this is Mitchell. I have the Nexus, requesting immediate extraction. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end. Then Umbra's voice, shaky with relief. Mitchell, you're alive. You have the Nexus. Affirmative, Jacob said. But we need to hurry. The Zorgans won't be far behind. Understood. Stealth ship en route to your position. ETA 15 minutes. Jacob signed off and took a deep breath, looking out over the alien landscape. He had done it. Against all odds, he had retrieved the Nexus. The galaxy was safe. Or was it? Nexus revelation. As he stood there, waiting for his ride, Jacob felt a sudden presence in his mind. It was the Nexus, reaching out to him, communicating not in words, but in pure concepts and emotions. He saw its history, a tragic tale of a once peaceful race enslaved and exploited by the Zorgan. He felt its pain, its anger, and its desperate desire for freedom. And he saw the Zorgans' true plans, the full extent of their cruelty and ambition. They wouldn't stop with the Nexus. They would use its power to conquer and enslave, to bend the entire galaxy to their will. Jacob's fists clenched, the Nexus's energy sparking between his fingers. He couldn't let that happen. He wouldn't. The Nexus pulsed in agreement, its power surging through him, ready to be unleashed. Together, they would take the fight to the Zorgans. Together, they would end this threat once and for all. Stealth ship arrival. The sound of an approaching engine caught Jacob's attention. He looked up to see the stealth ship descending, its black hull nearly invisible against the stars. It touched down gently, a hatch opening in its side. Jacob strode towards it, the Nexus glowing brightly in his hand. He knew, with a sudden, unshakable certainty, that his mission was far from over. It was only just beginning. The Overlord, changing the mission. As the stealth ship docked with the research facility, Jacob limped up the ramp, his hand clutching the glowing Nexus. Umbra greeted him, his tentacles twitching with a mix of relief and awe. "The Council is eager to secure the Nexus," Umbra said. "We must return to Galactic Headquarters immediately." But Jacob shook his head. "No, we're not going back to the Council. Not yet." Umbra's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "The mission was to retrieve the Nexus." "The mission has changed," Jacob said, his voice filled with a new resolve. "We're going to the Zorgan homeworld. We're going to end this war once and for all." Zorgan Empire. Using the Nexus's power, Jacob cloaked the stealth ship, altering its energy signature to mimic a Zorgan vessel. As they set course for the heart of the Zorgan Empire, Jacob delved into the Nexus's memories. He saw visions of its creators, beings of pure energy who had sought to bring balance to a chaotic universe. They had poured their wisdom into the Nexus, hoping it would guide lesser races towards peace and unity. But the Zorgan had perverted that purpose. Their quest for domination, the Nexus revealed, stemmed from a fundamental misunderstanding of the cosmos. They sought to control, to subjugate, when the true path was cooperation and harmony. Confronting the Overlord. As the ship hurtled through the void, Jacob and the Nexus forged a plan. They would confront the Zorgan Overlord, expose the flaws in his ideology, and show his people a better way. They emerged from hyperspace above the Zorgan homeworld, a planet of jagged mountains and roiling lava seas. The capital city sprawled across the surface, a forest of obsidian towers linked by pulsing energy conduits. Cloaked by the Nexus, they landed in the heart of the city, the ship's hull shimmering into invisibility. Jacob stepped out into the sulphurous air, the Nexus pulsing in his grip. The streets were eerily empty as they made their way towards the Overlord's palace, a monolithic structure that seemed to defy gravity. Its twisting spires and arching bridges hurt the eye, as if the building itself rejected the laws of physics. Battle at the palace gates. At the palace gates, they were confronted by a phalanx of guards, each a towering reptilian behemoth encased in advanced armor. Jacob could feel the hum of the Nexus in his mind, could sense the flow of energy through the palace's power grid. He reached out with his thoughts, tapping into that grid. The guards' weapons sparked and died in their hands. They roared in fury, charging forward with fists like wrecking balls. Jacob leaped into their midst, the Nexus guiding his movements. He ducked and weaved, striking with precision, each blow backed by the force of a small sun. The guards fell like toppled trees, their armor cracked and smoking. As the last guard crumpled, a shadow fell across the courtyard. Jacob looked up to see a figure striding through the palace gates, a being out of nightmare. It was the Zorgan Overlord, clad in an exoskeleton of black metal, his eyes burning with malevolent intelligence. Weapons bristled from every surface of his armor, humming with barely restrained power. Showdown with the Overlord. "You dare much, human," the Overlord hissed, his voice like the scrape of a dagger on bone. "But your journey ends here. The Nexus will be mine, and your species will kneel before the might of the Zorgan Empire." Jacob stood his ground, the Nexus blazing in his hand. "You're wrong," he said, his voice ringing with conviction. "The Nexus doesn't belong to you or to anyone. It's a gift, a guide to show us the path to peace. But you've twisted its purpose, just as you've twisted your own people." The Overlord laughed, a sound like shattering glass. "Peace is a lie," he snarled. "There is only power, and those too weak to seek it. The galaxy will belong to the Zorgan, and we will reshape it in our image. He raised his arm, a cannon unfolding from his gauntlet. It hummed as it charged, the air around it shimmering with heat. Jacob tensed, the Nexus thrumming in anticipation. This was it, the moment of truth. The fate of the galaxy would be decided here, in the heart of the Zorgan Empire. He charged forward, a battle cry on his lips, as the Overlord's cannon roared to life. The turning point. Clash of titans. The courtyard exploded in a maelstrom of fire and light, the very air burning with the heat of their clash. Jacob ducked under the cannon blast, feeling the searing heat pass inches from his face. He rolled, coming up inside the Overlord's guard, and slammed his fist into the towering Zorgan's chestplate. The blow, backed by the Nexus's power, sent the Overlord staggering back, his armor dented. But he recovered quickly, a blade of crackling energy extending from his other gauntlet. He slashed at Jacob, the air sizzling with each swing. Jacob leaped back, the Nexus guiding his movements. He could feel its power surging through him, could see the patterns of energy that made up the Overlord's armor. There was a weakness there, a flaw in the exoskeleton's power distribution. He feinted left, then right, drawing the Overlord's blade. As the Zorgan overextended, Jacob lunged forward, his hands slamming into the weak point with all the force of a collapsing star. Overlord's fall. The Overlord's armor shattered, the feedback from the Nexus's energy overloading its systems. The towering Zorgan screamed as arcs of electricity coursed over his body, cooking him alive in his own exoskeleton. As the Overlord fell, smoke pouring from the rents in his armor, Jacob stood over him, the Nexus held high. "Your reign is over," he said, his voice ringing with the authority of the ancient beings who had created the Nexus. The Zorgan Empire will no longer threaten the galaxy. But the Overlord, even in defeat, laughed. It was a terrible sound, filled with malice and madness. "You think this is over," he rasped, his voice a ruin. "You have no idea what you've unleashed. The Zorgan Empire was the only thing keeping them in check. Without us, they will consume the galaxy." Jacob's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about? Who are they?" The Overlord's laughter turned to a choking cough. "You'll find out soon enough," he said, a vicious grin splitting his face. "And when you do, you'll wish you had let the Zorgans conquer you. Compared to them, we were salvation." With a final, shuddering breath, the Overlord died, his words hanging in the air like a curse. New threat. Jacob stood in the sudden silence of the courtyard, the Nexus heavy in his hand. He looked up at the Zorgan Palace, at the city beyond, and felt a sudden chill. The Overlord's final words echoed in his mind, a warning of a threat beyond imagining. He turned to Umbra, who had watched the battle in stunned silence. "We need to get back to the Council," he said, his voice grim. "Something tells me our mission is far from over." A new journey. As they made their way back to the stealth ship, Jacob couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. The Overlord's words had planted a seed of fear in his heart, a fear that there were darker forces at work, forces that even the Nexus couldn't comprehend. But he couldn't let that fear paralyze him. He had a duty to protect the galaxy, to ensure that peace and freedom prevailed. And with the Nexus by his side, he knew he had the power to do it. As the ship lifted off, heading back to galactic headquarters, Jacob took a deep breath. This was only the beginning. The real battle was yet to come, and he would be ready for it. The awakening. Return to the Council. As the stealth ship docked with the galactic headquarters, Jacob felt a mix of relief and apprehension. The battle with the Zorgan Overlord had been won, but the Overlord's final warning lingered in his mind. He knew that a new threat loomed on the horizon, one that could plunge the entire galaxy into chaos. Council briefing. The council chamber was abuzz with activity as Jacob and Umbra entered. Representatives from various species debated and discussed the latest developments. When Jacob stepped forward, the room fell silent. "Counselors," Jacob began, his voice steady, The mission was a success. The Nexus has been retrieved, and the Zorgon Overlord is no more. A murmur of relief swept through the chamber, but Jacob raised a hand to silence it. However, the Overlord's final words were a warning. He spoke of a greater threat, one that the Zorgon Empire was holding at bay. We must prepare for whatever is coming. Nexus Insight. As Jacob spoke, the Nexus pulsed in his hand, its energy resonating with his words. He could feel its ancient wisdom guiding him, revealing glimpses of the future. The threat was real, and it was coming. Counselor Umbra, Jacob continued, turning to his ally. We need to mobilize our forces, strengthen our defenses, and gather intelligence on this new enemy. The Nexus has shown me visions of a powerful, malevolent force that seeks to conquer and consume. We must be ready. Umbra nodded, his tentacles twitching with determination. We will do whatever it takes to protect the galaxy, Jacob. The Council stands with you. Galactic Unity. Over the next few weeks, the galaxy united like never before. Species that had once been enemies now worked side by side, their differences set aside in the face of a common threat. Fleets were assembled, defenses fortified, and alliances forged. Jacob, with the Nexus's guidance, took on the role of a strategist and leader. He coordinated efforts, shared the Nexus's insights, and inspired hope in the hearts of those who fought alongside him. The galaxy was preparing for war, but it was also preparing for something greater, a future of unity and cooperation. The Vicon arrival. One fateful day, the galaxy's worst fears were realized. A massive vessel entered Zorgon space, its hull a twisted mass of organic and mechanical components, pulsing with an eerie green light. It was a Vicon ship, the vanguard of an extragalactic empire that had consumed countless worlds. As the Vicon ship approached, it unleashed a barrage of energy weapons, tearing through Zorgon defenses like they were made of paper. Colony after colony fell, the Vicon leaving only destruction in their wake. Galactic counterattack. Jacob and the Council quickly organized a counterattack. Allied fleets from a dozen worlds converged on the Vicon ship, their weapons pounding against its shields. But the Vicon vessel seemed invulnerable, shrugging off the attacks with ease. We have to take the fight to them, Jacob said, determination burning in his eyes. We need to get inside that ship and take it down from within. Boarding the Vicon ship, Jacob led a team of elite warriors on a daring mission to infiltrate the Vicon ship. Using the Nexus's power, they slipped past its defenses and entered the alien vessel. Inside, they found a nightmarish labyrinth of pulsing conduits and flickering lights, strange insectoid creatures scuttling in the shadows. The Nexus guided Jacob, showing him the way to the ship's core. They fought their way through hordes of Vicon drones, their plasma rifles barely holding the creatures at bay. Finally, they reached the core, a pulsating mass of energy that hurt the eyes to look at.